Nicole is my fourth child, the youngest of three big brothers, the only daughter. She lost her life to fentanyl in April of 2024. Nicole was well loved. Three big brothers that teased her and toughened her up, but also treated her like a princess. She had them all wrapped around her fingers. They protected her. They watched over her. She loved her brothers. She was playful, creative, funny. She loved to draw. She loved to dance. She loved life. She loved to be outdoors. She loved friends. She loved school.
I had the honor of really stepping into that role at the age of 11. She was a bright little star, full of energy, desperate to have a man in her life that kind of fit that role. And I knew I could never replace her dad, but I also knew that I could love her well.
She started struggling around age 13. When her body started changing, her brain started changing, and things started happening. Nicole had a hard life. She was given some hard things to deal with early on. We went through a divorce when she was 6, her father and I. And shortly, about 6 months after we divorced, he had been struggling with an opioid use disorder. And he died by suicide. It's very hard. It's very hard to adapt to understand. But we tried. I offered as much as I could with resources, friends, therapy. But it was still hard for Nicole. She had a lot of emptiness inside of her that seemed to not be fillable. And at 11, I remarried. And she was very close to her stepdad. But between 7 and 11, it was really hard for her. Her dad passed. I had to go back to work. She, at that point, needed to come home alone to an empty house until one of her brothers got home. And that was really hard for her, to be home alone. So that emptiness just was deep.
I did have a connection. Matter of fact, like Jane mentioned, that she would come home from school alone until one of her brothers got there. And then Jane was running a business at the time. And so her hours were, there was some variety there. And so I would come by after work sometimes, and Jane wouldn't be there, but Nicole and maybe David or Kevin were there. Not too often Ryan. He was married with, a baby. But anyways, I'd come over, and a lot of times she would make dinner. One of her favorite meals was boutoni with Alfredo sauce. And so, that was a big thing. She wanted to make dinner for me and made her feel a part.
When she was 11, we moved to a new city, and she was excited about that. And she did well for about a year. And At 13, I think she was introduced to nicotine and started smoking. We didn't know it. And at 14, her body started changing, and she started understanding that there was something fillable through relationships with guys. And she started being sexually active when she was 14. And this was really the first area where she had these compulsive behaviors to connect with not very healthy boys. And this just sort of escalated through the years in intensity and frequency. And she started smoking weed when she was 15. And then she was introduced to Percocets in her senior year when she was just 18.
As she got older, we would do date nights every once in a while. Loved sushi. I think if she could have eaten it every day, probably would have. One of the last dates we had, I took her on a date for sushi, a new sushi place there where we live. That was at a time when she was using, and I kind of reflect back on that. That was a difficult day because she had been using that day, and I knew that something was going on, and it was hard for me to call her out on that. I did ask her if she was okay. And she, of course, had a very quick response. Everything was okay. It was just her eyelashes. But that didn't stop us from loving her.
When she was in her addiction, be it boys or relationships or weed or Percocets, she would change. Her look changed, her body changed, the way she dressed changed, her language changed. It was very overt. And so when you're the family, it's hard to make sense of. It's so black and white. She struggled with anxiety and depression. She had a lot of unresolved trauma. We kept trying to get her to get help for it, and she didn't want to. She was too afraid to face it. And she had all the resources at her fingertips of people and places and financial means or logistical means. She had it all. But she would continue to choose to abandon herself and run away from her pain. It's confusing when the child that you know so well is so unpredictable, and there's some understanding of, okay, they're a teenager and maybe this is normal, but it just was so on the other side of normal.
For a long time, we were ignorant of it. I mean, I think we knew things were going on, but chose not to address it. And then as we started finding out things, there were the behaviors and the change in the way she dressed was, sometimes it was just in your face. And you couldn't ignore it. And we would talk to her about it. And then we started noticing that she was pulling away. Things were secret. Catch her in lies. She started isolating. That's probably was one of the biggest things. Come home and from school, grab a snack, and she'd go back to her room and she would sleep. And she would sleep until dinner time and then get up and eat. Sometimes go back and go to sleep, or I mean, she worked, so when she wasn't working, that's what we'd see her do a lot around the house.
And I wanted to be friends with her. I wanted to have that close relationship as she was getting older. And the closer I'd come to her, the more she would pull back. And again, I didn't even know she was using. I didn't understand what was going on. And in two years before she died, I thought, well, I'm going to take her to a mother-daughter trip to Arizona and work on us. And we went out there, and it didn't really work. It was just hard to get along with her, to where I couldn't even make sense of why it was so hard. And then I tried again a year before she died. And this was when she was actually in a PHP and IOP program, an intensive outpatient program or partial hospitalization program for addiction and mental health. And because she was sober, we got along really well. It was a great weekend. I'm so thankful that we had the time to do that. But I found out when she was about to graduate from high school that she was actually doing drugs. That's when I really found out. It's a funny story. So I'm a mental health clinician, therapist, right? And I have a client that I had been seeing for a while, and they had canceled an appointment that they normally had with me because they had something to do. And they texted and said, hey, I actually really, really need to see you. And I said, okay, must be going through some crisis. It's normal. And they came in and sat down and told me that they had heard from their child that Nicole had been actively seeking out fentanyl. And I thought, oh, okay, this is awkward, right? Here I am with my client. They're telling me about my child. And I'm so thankful that person did the right thing. I was not aware. And so with that information, I was able to approach Nicole and address her and tell her that I knew and that we have to do something immediately. And that's when I put her into that outpatient program, inpatient program, to get help. And she was sober for 100 days. And she relapsed. And again, those behaviors, they started again. It's interesting. We found out later there's a smell of fentanyl. We didn't know. We had been smelling that smell in our house. When you smoke fentanyl, it smells like electrical fire. And we couldn't figure out why this smell kept happening. And we were so naive or ignorant, I guess, at the point that we even called an electrician, and we thought maybe something's wrong with the fan in her room. And the electrician came and said, no, everything's okay. And it turns out that all the while that was really the smell of what it smells like when you smoke it. And so on her birthday, I smelled that smell again. And I thought, what is going on? Why do I keep smelling that smell? And at the same time, she's so hyped up and such a weird personality. It didn't last long. It was like a euphoria for, 15 minutes. But that's when I started searching her room. And I found things that I didn't really understand what they were. Straws, foil, tampon applicators. They use these things to smoke spoons. And, I had to learn myself what these things were. And it was, maybe a few days later, I got a message on Facebook from somebody. She had spent the night somewhere, and this person had gone out because she kept disappearing and going to her car. And he went and checked on her, and she was overdosed in her car. And there was foil next to her in the seat. So she had been smoking over at his house. And he texted me. He's like, "Hey, I don't do drugs. I don't know what this is. I've looked it on Reddit, and it seems like it's kind of major. I just think you should know." So again, he did the right thing. And we have to do the right thing in these cases, is to talk and share information and help. I wouldn't have known otherwise. And so as soon as I got that information, we put her in a residential rehab in Tennessee for 30 days. She didn't want to stay longer. I told her, you can't come home here. I knew that she would just go back to it if she came back home. So she went to sober living out in Fort Worth. And she struggled. She struggled with working the program. She struggled with doing her steps. It was hard for her. She would get involved again with another toxic guy, and she would go right back to it. And that's when she had her relapse after being sober for 6 months. She had a skill set. She had an overconfidence that she would present as a mask. She's a beautiful girl. She knew all the language. I always joke, she got her master's alongside me when I went back to school. She knew all the mental health terminology and language and research. She read half my papers, and she knew how to work it. She went into sober living, and she did okay at first. She finally settled into it, and she was so impressive that they kind of moved her into assistant house manager very quickly. Maybe in 2 months, she was assistant house manager, which requires some duties. And then the house manager left in January or late December, and they moved Nicole up to house manager. So Nicole's 19 years old in a sober living with the majority age, probably 35 to 55, in charge. And the death date of her father was April 17th. And that's the day that she relapsed in 2024. The family knew. She seemed like we knew. Like, she had started a text chain with her brothers around, I don't know, maybe it was early morning hours on a Wednesday night, April 17th. Just, "What's up?" Out of character for her at that time in her life. There were some pretty edgy TikToks that she had uploaded that day or even the day before. There were some signs. When Nicole was in her addiction, she really touched in with her sexuality. That was kind of her identity. And the brothers were like, "Why are you awake? Like, what are you doing? Why were you awake last night?" And she had sent me a couple odd texts that next day. I thought, interesting. Okay, that reminded me of the old days, I kind of thought. And then I didn't hear from her. But I guess she had used, and I guess the house, somebody knew there. I think they reported that she was nodding off in the morning meeting on Thursday. And they tested her, and she tested positive. And in sober living, the agreement is if you use, you're out. Gone. You have to be out for 7 days. You can come back to one of our other homes, but you can't come back to this one. You need to figure it out. And there just was so much she was carrying with that anniversary date, so much responsibility she was carrying, so much shame in relapsing. She just took a deep dive and used and used and used. She loaded all of her stuff into her car. She came back to our hometown, found her old friend, the one that actually turned her on to Percocet. But they used for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I got a phone call from the Sober Living on Thursday reporting to me what had happened, that they found out that she'd used and they kicked her out. They wanted me to know. And so I called Nicole and I said, hey, let's talk. It's okay. It's part of recovery is relapse. She said, Mom, are you mad at me? Or do you still love me? I said, of course. Come over. Let's figure this out. She's like, no, I'm not going to come over. I said, would you come over on Saturday? No, I'm not going to come over. And she sent me this little meme. It was just box of shame with these eyes blinking inside this box. And I told her, it's okay. I love you. It's just part of the process. You didn't do anything wrong. But she finally agreed to come over on Sunday night for dinner. And so we made her favorite dinner, chicken and dumplings. And she came over and she was not in a good state. She was high. She had that look of disconnect in her brain. I don't know if what she had done with her eyebrows were all razored up, like hair was missing. I don't know what was happening there. Her makeup was all runny. Her hair was a mess. I almost didn't recognize her. The language that she used was just a lot. And I sat it down with her on the couch. I said, Nicole, can you go back to rehab? She says, no, Mom, nothing works for me. I've seen 3 therapists. I've been to IOP and PHP. I've done rehab. I've done sober living. Nothing works for me. So she ran out of hope.
We knew that she had been using that day. And I think sometimes that's where I want to beat myself up. You should have made her stay. You should have made her stay. The reality is we don't know whether that would have changed anything. It may or may not have. Made me very sad to see her. Just even some of her behaviors, manners, when we sat down to eat were so off for her. And knowing where she had come from that last Thursday to where she was that Sunday night, all of the thinking behind the scenes, knowing what had happened on Thursday and just not hearing from her. A lot of sadness and concern.
And so she made the choice that night to leave. She wanted to go to work. She was working at a church with children. She loved children. And she said that she really wanted to go to work the next day. And so I said, well, where are you going to stay? And she said, I'm going to get a motel. I said, okay, let me help you with that at least. So we got her a hotel. She paid for it for a week. And when she left our home, she told us she was going to where she paid for the week, but she got pulled over. She got pulled over in our city or our town, and 2 citizens had seen her driving erratically and called the police. And they pulled her over, 5 cops. She was given a field sobriety test. She was given a ticket for paraphernalia and a Percocet pill in her car that she said belonged to someone else. She cried and said that she's just in distress because she got in a fight with her boyfriend because he was cheating on her friend with her. None of this was true. She just made that up. It actually was true. It happened in the past, but she just pulled up a past story. And they didn't believe her. The police didn't believe her. We watched the body cam footage, and they knew that she was high.
All right, honey. Your parents live in Flower Mound, right?
Yeah.
Are they able to come get you?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. Okay, and I'm gonna be super duper honest with you. Okay. I cannot say that I believe that you are not using. Okay. But listen to my reasoning. Okay. Everything that you have in that car. Okay. From the spoon. There's a spoon in your purse. Spoon in your purse. You have a roll of tinfoil. You have burnt tinfoil next to you. Your eyes were pinpoint when I was talking to you. They're still pinpoint, which is a sign of opioid usage. Okay, that's not normal. Okay, you have some markings that look abnormal to me as well on your face and stuff of that nature. I'm just telling you as an overall totality of what I'm observing from my experience as a police officer. Okay, you're gonna get some tickets tonight. Okay. For the vape and the drug paraphernalia, okay? I suggest, if you are truly clean, you stay away from losers who are freebasing fentanyl in your car, okay? Because the oxy and the perks, that's not what that is. I'm here to tell you, okay?
I mean, I appreciate you telling me.
I'm
really mad. Not you.
Well, I don't care if you're mad at me or not, but I understand that you're not. So what I would like you to do is...
That's my alarm.
Okay. What I'm gonna have you do is you're gonna call somebody to come get you, okay?
Okay.
All right, that's a much better alternative tonight than going to jail.
Okay.
Okay? We'll get your phone for you.
I'm sorry.
Here's your. Well, actually, I'm gonna keep that so I can write you some tickets, okay? Yeah, I'm gonna have you start calling. Don't go in your car yet, because I've got to take some of the shit out of your car, okay?
They knew that she was high. Then they told her, call your parents. They're right down the road. Just call your parents. Leave your car here. Go home. And she told them, okay, I'll do that. And she made the choice to, I think it was a critical error. She called her boyfriend and she didn't call us. And she had him pick her up. And she spent the night at his house. And she went, the next day, she went to work for the late shift at the church. They said that she seemed really weird that day because I think she was high. And after work, she decided to meet another boy that she had had in her past that she met at an NA meeting. They were going to smoke together. We found this out on her phone. And she went over there and they started smoking about 7:30, and she passed out and she never woke up. He woke up to her body lifeless, cold. She'd been dead for probably about 6 hours. And he didn't call 911. He ran out and yelled for Narcan, but an escort called 911 to get her some help. And in the meantime, as that 911 call was made, the boy that she was with got rid of her phone, gave it away, because the phone is the most important thing in any investigation. So he gave that away to be sold to someone else. He wiped her laptop, just put it back to factory default. And 911 came. They performed CPR, tried to warm up her body. She was long gone. And took her away.
she wanted to go to work, and she left that night, and we really expected that that's what was going to happen, is that she would go to work. She loved those kids. And I guess I thought that was enough to keep her going. But I'd gone to work on Monday, just a normal day, come home, and of course, Jane and I were still concerned about that, so we talked. But then next morning, with our busy schedules, I went to work, and I know Jane had appointments that morning. So I was at the office, and the phone rang, and like Jane, it said Tarrant County on it. And I was, I don't know, kind of hesitant to pick it up, but knew that I probably should. Had no idea what it was going to be about. And as I did, and the guy on the other end of the line said, "Hi, this is so-and-so from Fort Worth Medical Examiner's office." I got up and I took the phone into a small teleconference room that we had there at the office, and he proceeded to tell me that he had Nicole, and all I could do is say, "Oh no. No, this can't be true."
My husband told me. He was called. Medical examiner called him. I was going to work that day, and I actually got 3 phone calls. I didn't answer. I don't know. I don't know why. It was God. I'm so glad I didn't answer. It just said Tarrant County. I thought, I don't want to answer that. So I went to work, and I saw 2 clients. I went out to get my 3rd client, and I see my husband sitting in the waiting room in the lobby.
Jane came out with her client, and they were leaving, and there was another person sitting there in the waiting room. It was her next client. And as she stood there in the doorway, she said, "Nicole?" It's still pretty heavy for me. I nodded my head, yes, and she's gone. I kind of mouthed that.
He didn't need to say anything. I knew. I knew she was gone. I knew I had to tell her brothers that she'd lost her fight. It seems like they're all in a different journey. They all handle it very differently. One doesn't talk at all, but feels a lot. Another one feels a lot and talks sometimes. You know, and the youngest one, he was closest in age to her. He seems to want all the information. He wants to know everything, and he likes to look at pictures and likes to talk about all of it. So the boy that she chose to trust, he's got a little bit of a past, and he's got an arrest record that's long. He's in jail right now on a possession charge. You know, without the phone, there's just no way to prove anything. They're trying to investigate him. The cops feel very confident that that's where she got the pill. He's got several arrests of carrying fentanyl powder, meth. When they just arrested him recently, he's been staying in the room right next door to the room where she died with him, in the same hotel. In this hotel, nine people have lost their life to drugs since 2020. So actually, a month after Nicole died, I got another erroneous message from a stranger that said, "Hey, sorry to say this to you, but are you the mom of a girl that died at the Executive Inn Hotel in Fort Worth?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, "My son died there a month after your daughter did." And so we connected, and we did some work with the city of Fort Worth with this hotel to try and alleviate or abate the activity that's going on there.
Some of the other things that we've done really is with the focus of bringing awareness. After learning about the body cam footage and the citation, we had some concerns with the town that we live in, and so we decided that we would go present to the town council and voice some of our current concerns. And it wasn't with the idea that we were going to point blame towards anybody, but to make it aware, because it's an affluent community and thriving. They want people to come there, do business, to come live. And if fentanyl seems to be, part of the underground there, then it makes sense that they want to keep it quiet. So we really wanted to advocate through our community an awareness about fentanyl, what's going on. Because if you go to the DEA data, you see a snapshot. They don't catch everything. They don't measure everything. And so we're not getting a full picture. And so, with four deaths in a local high school from substance abuse, I think that's more than enough to start bringing awareness.
There's a spoon in your purse. Spoon in your purse. You have a roll of tinfoil. You have burnt tinfoil next to you. Your eyes were pinpoint when I was talking to you. They're still pinpoint, which is a sign of opioid usage. Okay, that's not normal. Okay, you have some markings.
The PD that night, they highly suspected that she was high. They saw all the paraphernalia and the everything there, but they used discretion that night. Nicole had no history, no legal trouble, no ticket, nothing on her record. They just used the discretion of let her go, let her figure it out. She had lied to them and said that she's currently living in sober living. They had said, I know on the body cam footage that, they'll test her when she gets back to sober living and she'll sort of deal with those consequences. She just, that skill set she had of lying or masking was, it did not work to her advantage at the end.
The other thing that we really are hoping to find some traction on is to talk with legislators, law enforcement about protocols for field sobriety testing.
Are they able to come get you?
We pretty much got it down for alcohol.
Okay with that?
Can't do a urine test out in the field. Hard to do a blood test. And so, trying to take a test that seems to be pretty well proven for one substance, alcohol, doesn't work for the drugs that we've got today. And so trying to move away from so much discretion and base it on factual evidence, stuff that they can prove.
Yeah.
And right now, the only way that law enforcement can do that is to arrest somebody. And their words to us, we don't want to arrest somebody for using. We want to arrest the guys that are selling it.
The reason people use and develop this disease of addiction is because they're really trying to avoid their pain. They're running away from pain. And in Nicole's case, she had so much pain inside of her that she didn't want to deal with it. Genetically, she was prime for addiction. She had the mental health issues, and she had unresolved trauma. It's the unresolved trauma that she wouldn't work on. And the more she avoided it, the larger it became and the more pain that was created, which enticed her to lose herself in her addictions. And I think that addressing or understanding the trauma of your children is really, really important. To understand what trauma is, and trauma may not be what you think it is, but if it's something that a child couldn't handle or that overwhelmed their system, even if it didn't overwhelm yours, it's real to them. And every therapist, every rehab that Nicole went to, they always said, Nicole, you have to resolve the trauma. You have to work through it. And she didn't want to. So I just think that's really important to understand that the mental health piece of it, the unresolved trauma that lives in your body, and it creates so much pain that the natural thing to do is to run from it. But you can't run away from it. The last night when she came over to our house to visit, I took her down to my office to get her some pepper spray because I had pepper spray. And I said, look, can I at least send you off with this? And it was a good opportunity for us to be together. It was just she and I. And we were driving back from my office. And she told me, she said, Mom, I don't want to die. And I don't want to be a bad daughter. And she didn't want to die. But she used. She didn't make the choice that night when she got pulled over to ask for help, to say, I think I'm in trouble.